Okay, so I apologize. I didn't realize that when I pause my camera, eventually the camera will just shut off and not allow me to just keep starting over again, or allow me to just continue. When I pause it for too long, it just creates the video, and so unfortunately I have to keep creating new ones. So this is now the fourth video in this series. I apologize for that, but hopefully this will be the last one. I don't want to. Hopefully I won't have to pause it again. So anyways, where did we leave off? So let's look at so I'm in page 4 of the notes here in part 2. So Hume wants to say then, if our if our if our reasoning about cause and effect is not a relationship between ideas, and it's based on matters of fact, then he says, well, what is the basis for this kind of reasoning? It is matters of fact, but in particular with cause and effect, where does it come from? And it's not reasoning. That's what Hume wants to say. It's not reasoning. Reasoning takes the form of drawing logical inferences. Reasoning takes the form of there being a necessary connection between two things, not a probable connection. And so this gets into Hume's what he calls the problem of induction. That induction is not a kind of reasoning itself in the sense of it being knowledge. Knowledge implies objectivity and certainty, and it's a description about a state of affairs in the world that is the case, not that is probably the case, but that is the case. And so this is one of the most well-known things with Hume. It's called the problem of induction, and it's a big problem within the philosophy of science. And the problem is simply this: that he thinks that, for example, I remember my own undergraduate philosophy professor doing this, is that you take the book and you drop the book, and you have the singular now event is that when I let go of the book, it will fall. So we have the falling of the book as the effect and the letting go as the cause. And that is, and so we have that singular event. Then we make our inference to the future, and we say, every time I let go of the book, it will fall. So we make the leap from the singular event to the every event will always be this way. And we think, well, there's our argument. But of course, what Hume wants to say is that there is a premise that's being smuggled in there that you are assuming. And the premise is that the future will resemble the past. That is the hidden premise within inductive reasoning. And Hume says we have to justify that premise. We can't just assume it. It has to be argued for. And so the future resembling the past can only be justified by itself. Which is to say, if I ask you, how do you know that the future will resemble the past? You will simply say to me, well, it always has been that way. The future has always resembled the past. But of course, you quickly realize that is you are asserting the very thing I'm asking you to prove, and therefore there is no way to actually justify the fact that the future will resemble the past. And so that is Hume's kind of one of his most well-known kind of takedowns of cause and effect reasoning. It's not to say we have to abandon cause and effect, but it does lead us into a situation where we cannot necessarily, again, justify the leap from cause to effect, or based upon, again, a priori relations between ideas. There is no a priori relation between the concept of cause and the concept of effect. There is nothing a priori that if we take those two concepts, we can discover some kind of relation between them the same way that we can between bachelors and unmarried men. They are not concepts which allow us to determine some kind of a priori relation between them. So, a lot of what I just went over there, this problem of induction, Hume on page 5 of the notes here, what I have in bold there kind of talks about this. So just to kind of cover what I just said, in quotes here, quote, I shall allow, if you please, that one proposition may be justly inferred from the other. I know, in fact, that it always is inferred. But if you insist that inference is made by a chain of reasoning, I desire you to produce that chain of reasoning. There is a required medium which may enable to the mind to draw such an inference. So the inference that he's referring to here is that the future will resemble the past. His question is, how do we justify that inference? Where does it come from? And Hume's answer is it's experience itself that gives us that inference. It's not an a priori chain of reasoning from cause to effect. It's actually experience itself, and what Hume will go on to call custom. It's custom or habit that allows us to determine the relationship between cause and effect in past and future. It is a habit of the mind to expect the future will resemble the past. It is a psychological necessity to need the future to resemble the past. And indeed, it is necessary for us to experience the world in terms of the future resembling the past. Our experience would not even be human experience if we didn't have this expectation built in and developed over time. But the crucial point here is you may think, well, what's the difference? If we call it knowledge or we call it psychological necessity, what's the difference? But I really do think it gives us a different picture of what the human being is that it changes, it dethrones reason and rationality a little bit as what makes a human being so different than the rest of all other creatures. He's now saying that reason itself here is not really that powerful. In some ways, we are, passive in relation to the world, of needing to form this expectation of one event, following another, and continuing to be that way into the future. So let me just read here at the bottom of page 6 in the notes. All beliefs of matter of fact or real existence is derived merely from some object present to the memory or senses, and the customary conjunction between that and some other object. Having found in many instances that any two kind of objects, flame and heat, snow and cold, have always been joined together, the mind is carried by custom to expect heat or snow, and to believe that such a quality does exist and will discover itself upon a near approach. So we eventually come to give the names of cause and effect to these events that we experience. But that's only through custom and habit and convenience that we give these names of cause and effect. But cause and effect are not out there, independent phenomena happening independent of us. But we are projecting the names cause and effect onto our experience based upon our psychological need to do so. But there is no knowledge about what must be or is the case going on here. So let me see, that really does get into a lot of what I wanted to say, but I want to just look a little bit more here. Let me see what else is in the notes here. So in section 7, it's one of the longer sections. Eventually, Hume is kind of asking, similar to Locke, where does the idea of the connection between cause and effect, this idea of what we call necessary connection, where does it come from? And Hume wants to say, there is no impression that gives rise to this idea of necessary connection. That we cannot point to an impression that would give rise to it. And therefore, going all the way back to his original principle, the copy principle, no idea without a prior impression. So if there's no idea, or if there's no impression of necessary connection, then there is no concept or idea of it. So the only thing we have is constant conjunction. That is the impression we have of two ideas always going together, or seeming to always go. It's constant conjunction, but it's not necessary connection. And that is the big difference. Constant conjunction, not necessary connection. So um, at the end of the day, the big picture here that I want to kind of put in front of you is really what does this say about the human being? That we are habitually and psychologically kind of trained to expect the future to resemble the past, to expect causes and effects to go together, but there is no basis for reasoning about causes and effects. What does that say about us? Um, Hume is kind of this is kind of it's an evolutionary mechanism of expecting the future to resemble the past. It's the way that we have adapted to cope with our reality. So in that sense, it is necessary, but it is an evolutionary feature of us to expect the future to resemble the past. Um, it's not some a priori chain of reasoning that we have, and this really does give us a different conception of what the human being is, um, rather than, again, to think about the rationalist picture of the human being as a creature that can simply sort of engage in reasoning simply in isolation and discover all of these metaphysical truths about the world. The relationship between cause and effects, the existence of God, the existence of substance. Now we have a picture of the human being that is much more passive and adapting to the world rather than somebody who kind of stands outside the world and reasons about it. There is this fundamental interconnection between the world and the human being, not somebody who's standing outside it making claims about it. And that is really fundamentally different. And that's kind of in the discussion post for those of you in group 2. This is kind of what I'll be asking you to think about. So that's really all I have. Again, I apologize there's so many videos. And I hope you guys are all doing well. I do just want to, if you've made it this far into the videos, I just want to say one other thing. I just want to reiterate the point about needing extensions and deadlines. I'm in the process of grading your first paper, and you can revise and resubmit that paper. I've uploaded the instructions for doing so, but I continue to say these circumstances are crazy and insane, and I really do hope you're doing well. If you'd like to Zoom chat with me just to kind of vent or anything. I am here to listen to you. I do want you to know that. And if you need an extension deadline, just let me know. I'm very willing to grant these. And I hope you're doing well. And please stay safe and healthy. And I will talk to you all soon.